Welcome to Your Family's Health, the program that focuses on healthcare issues with unique and different modalities for taking charge of your health today. Experts talk weekly with our continuing roster of guests from around the country and right here in Nassau County to keep you up to date on the latest health issues and trends. Take care of your mind, body, and soul. Spend the next half hour with the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC, and get on the journey to better health.
Hello and welcome to Your Family's Health. My name is Dr. Jeanine Cook Garard from the nursing department here at Nassau Community College. Today we're going to meet a very successful actor, writer, and director, and someone who went through a very traumatic health scare and wants to tell the world about his ordeal to try to save other people from the same thing. My guest today is Erik Jensen, who made the Broadway debut in Andy Warhol, Jean-Michel Basquiat play. The collaboration opposite Paul Bettany and Jeremy Pope. He had an appearance in The Walking Dead, Mindhunter, and Mr. Robot as well. But he's on our show not only to promote his amazing career, but to talk about recently suffering from a ruptured brain aneurysm that nearly took his life. Erik, welcome to Your Family's Health on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Welcome.
Thank you, Doctor. It's a pleasure to be here. First,
tell us about yourself and your career as an actor up until this point and how you got your start in acting.
Sure. I'm an actor, writer, and director. I've had the good fortune to be in a bunch of different TV shows, some of them you mentioned, including Walking Dead, Mr. Robot. I started out acting when I was 11 years old, doing community theater with my parents.
Oh, nice.
And, doing plays like The Music Man and South Pacific and things like that.
Wow.
And and then I ended up going to Carnegie Mellon and studying acting for 4 years and ended up in New York City fully expecting to have a theater career and ended up doing a lot of film and TV instead, and then have just recently dipped my toe back in the theater world, and I'm really glad I did.
So, long career.
Yeah, I mean, relatively long career. I'm getting older. It gets a year longer every year. And my wife and I also work together. We're known for making what some people call verbatim theater, and other people call it documentary theater. We're known for writing a play called The Exonerated, and some other plays. Most recently, our play that we did with musician Steve Earle called Coal Country, about the Upper Big Branch mine disaster. It was I believe, avoidable mine disaster in West Virginia that took the lives of 29 miners, and we based the play on interviews we conducted with survivors of the explosion and family members of the deceased.
Interesting. So your wife is also an actress?
Yes, she is. She does a lot of television stuff as an actor. Mostly these days, she's doing a lot of directing and writing, and she teaches at the Juilliard School.
I understand that one of your projects called The Line was a documentary theater piece about medical first responders in New York City during COVID. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell us about that and how you conceived this project and how it's impacted your life?
Well, it's impacted my life in a lot of ways. I mean, it's impacted everybody's life, I guess. In the beginning of COVID, I guess in March sometime, we had just opened our play Coal Country at the Public Theater here in New York City, and sort of the murmurs and rumors of this virus sort of traveling around the world started to kind of leak their way into our rehearsals. Nobody took it pretty seriously at first because, there'd been Ebola scares and bird flu scares and things like that before. And we figured things would just be handled and eventually things would calm down. And after garnering really generous reviews from the press and the show starting to sell out after 26 performances, we were shut down. by COVID, and everybody was very scared. I in particular was frightened by the whole process. It triggered a lot of trauma in me, and I felt this incredible need to protect my family. But like a lot of things that scare me, after about 3 weeks of being scared, I couldn't be scared anymore, and we contacted the Public Theater, and Oscar Eustis, the artistic director at the Public, suggested we do a rapid response documentary theater play that we would do digitally online. It was one of the first digital plays that came out of New York City. And we conducted interviews with COVID first responders, ambulance drivers, EMTs, nurses, doctors, janitors, the person who had to do intubation, technicians.
Yeah.
And because it seemed to us that things were starting to split in the country in terms of what this was and the seriousness of it. And people were talking about it being a hoax and stuff like that. And we were like, no. We live down the street from a hospital. We see the refrigerated trucks.
Yes.
Our friends are getting sick. Everybody's getting sick. And it's very frightening and scary. And it's coming to a town near you. And we wanted people to understand to a greater degree what was going on in New York City. So in order to get around HIPAA laws and stuff like that, we conducted anonymous interviews with, I think, something like 20 or 22 different medical workers, and interviewed them directly, and then actors portrayed them in the digital theater piece.
So you talk about the scare, the COVID, this whole pandemic has been quite scary. How does that, if at all, connects to your subarachnoid hemorrhage or your brain aneurysm?
Well, from my understanding, it doesn't. The brain aneurysm was many years in the making, and had I had the wherewithal to go and get a brain scan of some kind, I would have done so, but there's never been anything like this in my family. There have been heart issues that I'm thankfully free of, but there had never been this kind of a thing in my family history. I guess the way it connects to COVID is, the shutdown of of stress, and the shutdown and fear being in the hospital, and fear of catching COVID in the hospital. But the way it connects to the pandemic is when I had the brain aneurysm, our show that had been canceled was back up, and my wife was in tech, and I was online with a friend, and I told them I have a headache, and I immediately blacked out and was taken to what I believe is probably the worst hospital in New York City, if not the worst hospital on the East Coast. It took them 4 hours to get me a CAT scan, which was even though my wife was begging and pleading and demanding that they get me one right away. Now, of course, the hospital was understaffed and overbooked, which I get as a funding issue, but still, once they gave me the CAT scan, they transferred me to another hospital with a good brain injury department, and within, I don't know, they let me stabilize, and within a couple of days I was in surgery getting a stent put in my brain.
Yeah. So what did the doctors say it was? What was the diagnosis upon them looking at the CAT scan of the brain?
They saw it was a hemorrhage. They said a brain aneurysm. I actually had two small ones like right next to each other, little bubbles on the blood vessel. I don't understand medically exactly how to phrase it, but subarachnoid hemorrhage is the sort of catch-all phrase for what happened to me.
Did the doctors describe for you whether this aneurysm was coming from? Was it genetic? Was it your lifestyle? Did they kind of elucidate what it was coming from for you?
I believe part of it had to do with lifestyle. I would say it was probably 80% lifestyle, 20% genetic. I had been, I'm sober now, but I've been fairly free with my drinking, and I believe that that contributed a bit to it, but not to any huge degree. I think largely it was just a genetic thing that happened, and luckily I'm free and clear of anything now, and I get a regular brain scan and they look for stuff, and all the stuff that they look for that's nasty seems to have receded and gone into the background. And I'm very lucky to be here and lucky to be alive. It's my understanding that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I interrupted.
No, go ahead. I know that you was talking about you had a headache, but was there any other symptoms that you experienced going into the hospital?
The week before, I had been talking to my wife, and like I said, I'd been sober for a while, and she said, "Have you been drinking?" And I was like, "No, I don't drink anymore." Right. And she said, "You're slurring your speech," and that should have been a huge, big red flag for us. But I said the alphabet to her, and I talked to her again, and I didn't have any problems. So I think I slurred my speech a few times, and that was the only warning sign that, in hindsight, if we had any knowledge about this at all, we would have gone ahead and taken care of, immediately gotten to the hospital. But
yeah, because those are subtle cues, and probably the nosebleed or maybe a headache, and a combination of these things probably landed you into the emergency room. So these were observations that were seen by yourself and your wife. Or did your coworkers notice a difference in your behavior as well?
No, I'm very, very lucky because, my understanding is that 50% of people who have one of these die on their way to the hospital. And of the 50% that survive it, 80% have some kind of ongoing difficulty, either physical or cognitive, that they have to wrestle through. And I've been very fortunate in having none of those side effects and no recurrence since I'm celebrating my year anniversary of the aneurysm tomorrow.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So when you said there were stents put in, right? You talked about a procedure and surgery that was done as a result of this brain bleed. Describe that for us. What was that like?
Well, I mean, I was not awake for the most interesting parts of it, but I can tell you that it was very scary for my family. Yeah. I was a fairly, I'm a pretty good patient. Once I get over my anxiety in the hospital, I'm polite. I ask for what I need. And I don't try to leave the hospital. Okay. My wife and daughter, however, were my wife in particular was walked through a series of, before the surgery, was walked through a series of things that could happen, and had to sign a bunch of papers absolving them of any responsibility if these things did happen, including the possibility of having another hemorrhage during my surgery. It was explained to me that, and so that was very frightening for her. And fortunately, we have a big theater and film TV community here in New York, and a lot of people came to keep her company and support her. It would have been good, I think, better if the hospital had offered some emotional support as well, rather than just a doctor kind of coldly explaining the facts to her. But that's hindsight being 2020. So the community gathered around, and it was explained to me that they were going to go up through an artery, I believe, in my leg, and work their way up to my brain that way. So they didn't have to open my skull or anything scary like that. But in the paperwork she signed, the doctor said there is a possibility we may need to sort of, have a more invasive procedure, and do we have your permission to do this, and she had to sign all the permissions and wait while I was in surgery for several hours.
So if you had to probably make recommendations for someone who's going through this kind of issue, what would you recommend? I mean, from start to beginning, from the symptoms through the procedure and even on the road to recovery. Are there any life lessons that you've learned that you would want to share?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's funny. Let me answer your question in an indirect way, and then I'll get more to the point. Sure. After I'd fully recovered, my wife and I and daughter, we took a trip to Paris, which we had promised my daughter, and especially considering the few months that we'd had while I was recovering. She deserved it. She'd earned it. And we took a stop off in London to see my friend in a play. And it was a production of The Seagull by Chekhov. And it was it's on the West End. It's their version of Broadway. And starring in it was yet an actress from Game of Thrones named Emilia Clarke. And Emilia has had two brain aneurysms, well, one right after the other. She had the thing happen during surgery. She had a second brain aneurysm. That it's my understanding anyway. And she was in this play, and I saw her on stage in this amazing play, and she was there, she was present, she was doing amazing work. She'd memorized all this dialogue and was not symptomatic at all. And I was very inspired. Well, I sort of had this thought go through my head, well, if she can do theater on the West End, I can do theater on Broadway. And I asked my agents to please start submitting me for stuff. And the first thing that came along post aneurysm was this play called The Collaboration that just closed recently, starring Paul Bettany, who's the Vision in the Marvel movies, and Jeremy Pope, who nominated for a Golden Globe this year. So, and Krista Rodriguez is also in it too. She's a Broadway stalwart. So I was working at the top of my game with three great actors and a wonderful director named Kwame Kweyarma. And, I was a little trepidatious at first. I was wondering if, I would show any signs of not being able to memorize and not being able to do the work. And I'm very, very, very lucky, to have been so inspired by Amelia's story and to have made the decision along with my family to tread the boards on Broadway again. And I just had a wonderful time. I didn't drop a line the whole 80 something show run.
That's great.
I was really on point, and I had something to prove to myself. And I think I successfully proved it. And then also, kind of entertained people along the way and got used to being around audiences again, especially after the pandemic. It was nice to be declaring, saying these lines in front of people and in a very, what I believe is a life affirming and art affirming play. Mm-hmm. So if I had any lesson to sort of talk to anybody about, first of all, see your doctor. Second of all, consider changing your lifestyle. And if any of these signs, nosebleeds, persistent headaches or word slurring or any of those things come up, go get yourself checked out. But in terms of the biggest life lesson is I realized how surrounded by community I am. Sometimes it takes something like this to really open your eyes to how many people out there love you. I was pretty blind to that before this happened, and then a lot of people came by my house to kind of watch over me and take care of me during the time. So I'm very appreciative. I'm a day at a time guy now.
You're listening to Your Family's Health on the voice of Nassau Community College 90.3 WHPC. My name is Dr. Jeanine Cook Garard, and today you are meeting Erik Jensen, a successful actor, writer, and director who recently suffered a ruptured brain aneurysm that nearly took his life. So I have another question for you. I know that you talk about your wife and her talent and her ability. What would you say she took, or what were some takeaways for her? I know it was a scary place for her when you were going through this. Has she shared with you some things that she's learned that you can give and offer to family members who may be having a similar experience?
Well, like I said, I'm the exception, not the rule. Usually when people have one of these things, more often than not, they have some physical or cognitive things that they really need to struggle through to help them come back. And I think the first thing that she really learned was how fragile life is. Yeah. And as a result, I think we loved each other before, but we really love each other now. Yeah. And that support. That supporting your spouse sometimes is setting limits for them in terms of their daily behavior, in terms of what's acceptable and what isn't, in terms of what goes into the body. My diet has completely changed.
What are you eating now?
Very supportive and not pizza.
Okay.
Not a lot of cheese. I can tell you all the things I'm not eating.
Okay.
Obviously, like I said, I'm sober, so I'm not smoking pot or drinking anymore. I can't do those things anymore. Yeah. If I do those things, I'll put myself back in the hospital. Yeah. So I can't. But I don't. Frankly, it's been a year now, and I don't miss it.
Good.
which is really good. And credit goes to my friend Steve Earle for making sure that I got sober too, which I'm really grateful for.
Oh, that's awesome.
But I think also Jessica learned that she's resilient and that she can deal with fear, and that even under the hardest circumstances, you can really rely on your community to be gentle with you and to carry you, and that it's okay to ask for help. And she did, all of us are really encouraged in this country to be, individualists and, I'm going to make it and it's all about me, me, me. And when she engaged with the we of it all and the we're all in this together aspect of it all and really leaned on our community, they showed up, and they showed up over and over and over again for us. And we've spent the past year trying to return the favor when friends are struggling.
That's nice. So what projects do you have upcoming? I know that you're a writer, but I'm hearing that you also co-host a podcast.
Yes, I'm a Dungeons and Dragons nerd.
Exciting.
And my show that I'm on with my one of my best friends, Phaedra Al-Casey, is called Bard Quest Empire, where we talk about Dungeons and Dragons and storytelling and how the two are interrelated. And we interview showrunners and directors and actors who are into Dungeons and Dragons. So that's a labor of love right now. We don't have a huge audience, but we're working on it. And then aside from that, we're writing we're writing a movie right now about. We just finished writing it about Lester Bangs, and I can announce now that Cameron Crowe, who directed Almost Famous and directed Phil Hoffman as Lester Bangs, has come on board as a creative consultant, which I'm pretty excited about. Nice. And then we're also writing some TV with David Simon, who created The Wire. Wow. So we're breathing some real rarefied air here. We're very, very lucky to be working with these mentors and these masters of their craft. So
where can we find information about you? I mean, is there one place that we can go and we can learn all about you and your work?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on Instagram. Okay. I'm not a big Twitter guy now, but I'm active on Instagram, and my Instagram handle is Jensen. That's EJENSEN 123. So that's my Instagram handle, and I post about a lot of different things about there, including my health, so people can check in and see how I'm doing.
So now you talked about community and support. Is there one go-to organization that you go to for support?
Yes, there is. Amelia Clark has started an organization called Same You, which has to do with this kind of brain aneurysm and brain injury awareness, and how to support people who have gone through this, or how to avoid having to go through this yourself. The kind of checkups that I could have engaged with, knowing that there were some vascular heart problems in my family. Those I've found can also be connected to the brain as well. So if you have that in your history, and if your insurance allows you to do it, getting a brain scan is highly recommended. Getting an MRI in my mind. But yeah, Amelia's organization, Same You can find it on the internet. They are an amazing organization, and I can read stories and see interviews of people on their website who've gone through the same thing, and it certainly makes me feel less alone.
So do you have meetings, or is it just an internet meeting? What exactly is components of this organization support?
I think there may be meetings that happen between people who connect through this organization. I haven't engaged with that myself, but I did have some meetings with Amelia, and we're looking to use our documentary theater to maybe help raise money for the organization here, and maybe we'll be doing some interviewing of people who've gone through a similar thing that I've gone through, and we can use that piece to raise some money and bring more awareness about this to the public.
Is there any way that anybody can get involved with this organization to help give money or lend support?
Yeah, they have a website. All you have to do is Google Same You.
Same You, SAMEYOU. Same
yes,
You.
Ma'am.
And we can give support monetarily to this organization.
Sure. Absolutely. Or if you have a story, you can log the story on their website and share your story with people.
Now, I know having this brain aneurysm, it's sometimes when you hear things like this, you feel like you're all alone. Have you met other people that have shared similar stories, or is your story kind of unique? What has been your experience with hearing other kinds of experiences surrounding brain aneurysms?
Mine is unique in that I fully recovered immediately. I was back on stage again for somebody got COVID during one of our plays, and I was the only person who knew the part. So in 4 weeks, I was back on stage again, acting in a play just for 4 performances. That wore me out enough. But yeah, I can't tell you how many people I've met whose father or grandfather or brother or spouse or sibling, so many people have said, "Oh, my dad passed away from a brain aneurysm," or my dad suffered a brain aneurysm and he came out fine. I mostly run into men and hear from men who have had this thing. Not a lot of women have come forward to me with this kind of experience, but that's probably just because I'm a dude. So
you talked about your diet. How about exercise? Have you incorporated a livelier exercise regimen in your day?
Yeah, I got to lose 13 pounds. My actually right after this, my production assistant and I are gonna go for a nice 2 to 3 mile run with the dog. That's good. And so I walk my dog a lot and I run a lot. I used to run like 6 miles a day, but then I had some problems with my feet. So. So I've cut it down to 2 to 3 miles a day, and that's just enough to keep me going. And it's a nice way to keep the blood flowing and the stent happy.
Yeah, so that must be very challenging in Manhattan to go for a 6 mile run, right?
Oh, I'm in Brooklyn.
Oh, you're Brooklyn. So that makes it a little easier, so you can find places to run with your
there's a park.
With your wife and. Yeah. My wife and I run together sometimes, but I'm the real runner in the family. That's nice. So diet, exercise, and I guess also when we have to think about it, when you go through something this challenging, how does it change your perspective on outlook on life?
I do. I mean, I don't want to sound like I've drunk some Kool-Aid or have converted to a weird religion or anything like that, but I do feel this connection to people. I think I've become, although I was pretty gentle already, I've become a gentler person and a better listener. Yeah, because I've realized that this short time that I have on this planet, that concept doesn't just apply to me; it applies to everybody that I meet. And so I sort of play this game with myself of pretending that everybody I meet, that it's potentially their last day on the planet, and it allows me to approach people with more kindness and attention and love.
Yes.
I do tell people that I become friends with, I tell them, I turn around very quickly and tell them that I love them. And some people can handle that and some people can't, but that's okay. But nobody ever died regretting that they said they love people too much.
Thank you so much for being here, Erik Jensen. Thank you for sharing your amazing story. Congratulations to all your successes, and we hope you stay safe and continue to stay healthy.
Thanks, Jeanine. It's been a real pleasure talking to you today.
Likewise. This is Dr. Jeanine Cook Garard from the nursing department here at Nassau Community College, and we want to thank you for listening to this week's edition of Your Family's Health.
We'd like to get your feedback on your family's health. Send your comments by emailing them to whpc@ncc.edu. Podcasts of today's show are available on iTunes, Android Podcasts, and Spreaker. This program was produced at the studios of Nassau Community College in cooperation with the nursing department. Join us next week for another edition of Your Family's Health on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.